Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
All right, welcome back to episode 141 of the Last Round Podcast. Thank you again for joining us, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Boxing Socials, YouTube channel, wherever you're at, however you're listening. We appreciate it, coming off a possibly the last fight ever of the great career of the great Manny Pacquiao. It's not confirmed yet, but he has hinted that it could be his last fight. He seems like he hasn't made a decision, but obviously we'll dive in to that whole event and that whole matchup and, his prospective plans in the future. But jumping right into it, this week, we actually have a Manny Pacquiao team member who was in the corner. He's been in the corner of Manny Pacquiao the last couple fights, actually. He was there this past Saturday in Las Vegas at the T-Mobile Arena. Crime fighting Cutman. He's a Los Angeles homicide detective for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department here in Southern California. And he's also a professional cutman. We're pretty sure you've seen him on multiple platforms, multiple broadcasters. He's been with the biggest fighters and the biggest, biggest and best fighters in the sport of boxing. I believe this is his third or fourth time here on the Last Round. Mike Rodriguez joins us this week on the Last Round. Thank you again for joining us, Mike.
What's up, fellas? Always good to be back on with you guys. I always love chopping it up with you guys because you guys talk about, real issues in boxing, and you guys are, all the latest trends and all the big fights. So I'm welcome aboard to me. I'm glad to be on.
Thank you. We definitely appreciate that. We try to touch on everything that people want to listen to, behind the scenes or business or sports. So we definitely appreciate the kind words. Jumping right into it, obviously, like I mentioned, you were with Manny Pacquiao this past weekend against Pac-Ugas at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas on Fox pay-per-view. Just tell us, before we kind of dive into the fight and what your experience was during fight night, what was your experience during fight week? And then were you contracted again by Freddie, or is it kind of like when Pacquiao came back, you were automatically assumed the role?
Well, I was originally, when he fought 2 years ago, when he fought Keith Thurman, I worked with a lot of Freddie's guys. I work with a lot of Sean Gibbons guys, who's now president of Manny Pacquiao Promotions. So kind of a collaborative effort. They wanted to bring me in and told Manny that they wanted me for the Thurman fight. Had a little meeting with Manny, and he's like, hey, whatever you guys think is best. It went great. I get along great with the team. Justin Fortune, Boo Boy, the whole Pacquiao training staff. And, when it came time for him, this fight was announced, and, I was asked to come back by Sean and by Freddie. And obviously Manny was on board. So it's just one of those things where, like Sean Gibbons told me, he goes, Mike, if it ain't broke, if it ain't broke, there's no reason to fix it. And I was like, hey, I 100% agree with you. So, it really starts in the training camp. Manny trains in the afternoon here in the afternoons at Wild Card. My schedule allows me in the afternoons to be over there. So 3 or 4 days a week, I would go over there. My role within the camp, as far as his training camp, is I don't really do much. I'm just there to offer support. I'm part of the team. So I feel like I should be there, if I can. It's a team building kind of thing. Fight week kind of takes on its own little, has its own little energy and personality there at the MGM where it was, and, the grand arrivals and, all the different things leading up to the fight. But as we start getting to the weigh-ins and stuff, I start kind of getting my mind right, because it wasn't just Manny I was working with. Mm-hmm. He was obviously the big fish in that big pond, but, I had Mark Magasayo, mm-hmm. who was a huge fight, Victor Ortiz, who were all with Freddie. And then I was with Manny Robles and his brother-in-law Edgar with Carlos Castro. And then I had 2 undercard fights on Fox. So, I got to start gearing my preparation in my mind that it's not just there for one fight, getting there late. I actually got to the arena, man, at 10:30 in the morning for undefeated heavyweight Steven Torres, who for some odd reason, Fox had a card at 12:30 in the afternoon, West Coast time. And I worked with him, went back to the hotel, for about 2 hours and came back to T-Mobile to work with Joey Spencer's younger brother, Mikkel, who, I've known for several years. And it's really weird. I'm like, man, this kid's turning pro. And I remember when he was just like, 13, 14 years old. So it was great. And then obviously we got onto the main card. And once the main card, I started counting how many times I had to change shirts, because obviously I had a shirt for Castro, I had a shirt for Magasayo, I had a shirt for Ortiz, and I had a shirt for Manny, and making sure that my ice was fresh. And it wasn't the smoothest transition going into the Manny fight, because if you remember, Victor Ortiz was cut in the third round, so I really, really had to work in that fight, and then get back and get Manny ready. So I wish I could say that I got to absorb everything, but it's one of those things where you reflect afterwards, especially when you're in a big fight like that with Manny. I mean, I'm standing there on the apron as he's coming into the ring, and I'm like, wow, I'm here again. And it's just a blessing to be part of such a big event with such a great legendary fighter.
Mike, how is the locker room when you're, wrapping some of the fighters' hands? Because we've had Stitch Duran on a couple of times before, and he was saying about, that's the kind of moment where he kind of gives them confidence and tries to get them, to focus on the fight. Is that something that you kind of agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, because all the fights I was working, I didn't wrap any of the hands, because most of your top trainers, your Freddie Roaches, your Manny Robles's, your Marvin Samodios, they wrap their fighters' hands. Freddie has a great staff with Pepe Riley and Marvin that were there to help him out with Victor and Victor Ortiz and with Magasayo, obviously, because it's a big fight for Manny as well, and he's got to have his attention, as much as he can, even though Freddie's over there working the corners with Magasayo, and Victor Ortiz. So with this particular fighters, I didn't have to wrap any hands, but there are times that I do. I just went for the open media workout right now with Oscar De La Hoya. I've been going to training with him in the evenings, 2 or 3 days a week, and wrapping his hands, because I hadn't worked with Oscar before. He's been off for 13 years. Joe Chavez, one of my mentors, was his Cutman, who used to wrap his hands. So I want to get as familiar with his hands, and I want him to get as familiar with my wrap, so that on fight night, September 11th at Staples Center against Vito Belfort, he's comfortable with everything we're doing. We're working out all the kinks. It's kind of like a training camp for me, working cuts and for wrapping his hands.
Mike, you mentioned that you got there at 10:30. And then you had a fight at 12, and you were pretty much there all day. You went back to the hotel for like 2 hours, then you came back, and then you had to change shirts. I'm sure it's not the first time you're going to do that for quite a few events.
No.
Have you ever forgot to change shirts, and you're there, and they're like, "Hey, man, you got the wrong shirt on"?
Absolutely. Because there are times where, man, I hate to say it, but man, I have to go pee, man, and I got to run right back. And at these pay-per-views, there's like 12 minutes in between fights. Mm-hmm. There are times on Fox or Showtime or other fights, ESPN, that I've worked, I don't have that kind of time. And depending where the ring is and how big the venue is, I got to go back and get my ice together, because the ice melts with those TV lights. Yeah. And there's just a million things. I've gotten back, and they're like, "Man, you got the last guy's shirt on." And I say, "Man, sorry." So most of the time, I just try to wear my War Tape shirt, because that just kind of like the end all, because I'm one of the partners in the company. So it's just kind of like, if I don't have to, I won't. But you know what? Obviously, it's whatever the fighter wants to make them more comfortable, and obviously to rep them and their brand, I'm always willing to do.
So you mentioned that obviously the bigger, more prominent fighters like Pacquiao and those guys, they get their hands wrapped by like Freddie Roach and pretty much the primary trainer. So do you typically wrap the hands of like the younger, lesser known guys, or when do you do that?
It really just depends on the trainer. I work with Manny, with Freddie Roach. I work with Robert Garcia, Joel Diaz, Manny Robles, Ronnie Shields, Ariano Sosa in New York, Herman Casieto in Florida, Stephen Edwards in Philadelphia, out in LA, Danny Zamora, Henry Ramirez, John Pullman. These are guys that I work with regularly. With the exception of maybe Henry, who just prefers me to rap because his guys all like my rap, because I rap them, a bunch of times. These guys all wrap their own fighters' hands. Now, granted, if they got other fighters on the card and it becomes a time issue, then obviously I'm ready to do it. I'm confident in my rap. I just hate rapping a guy for the very first time ever on fight night, because you don't know his hands. He doesn't know the little nuances of how you rap, because everybody's different. Every hand is different. Every thumb is different. Some guys got thumbs that are easy to wrap. Some guys got sausage fingers, and it's hard to get your. It's just one of those things where I like to have a training camp with a fighter to be able to wrap him. I remember when Joey Spencer made his pro debut, I wrapped him a couple of times before he even fought, just to make sure that we worked out any kinks that we had on fight night. Sergey Lipinets and Sean Porter, both former world champions, I wrapped their hands a ton. Sean Porter and I can probably wrap his hands half asleep, and I can wrap his hands when he's fully asleep, because I've wrapped his hands so many times. He knows exactly when to move, when to squeeze his hand, and all that stuff. So there's a lot. Excuse me. The fighter plays a huge role in how his hand is wrapped by the way he's paying attention and not on his phone, and making sure that every time I do a turn with the gauze and the tape, that he's making that hand a nice strong fist, and he's making it functional for that fight.
So, like, for when you do get the chance to wrap a fighter's hands, like you said, it's Henry Ramirez, right?
Yeah.
When Henry asks you to do it to like his fighters, especially if they're like younger fighters, they're starting out their careers, or they have a couple fights. Do they ever try to talk to you when you're like wrapping their hand? Because I'm sure they know who you are.
Absolutely, because I build relationships with these people. A lot of the fighters, I've started off, Julian Williams. I started with J-Rock, and he was like 2-0. You build these relationships when you know them as people, and you try to keep the mood kind of light. We'll joke around and stuff, or it just depends. All fighters are different. Some guys are kind of easygoing. Some guys are kind of like, I'm going to get my game face on when I start walking. Other guys, you can tell, are a little bit tense. You just kind of feed off that atmosphere. I've worked with fighters that don't want to talk. The main thing is, let's just get his hand wrapped. Let's just get your hands wrapped, and then you can get back to your preparation as you get closer to walk to the ring.
Focusing on this past Saturday's event, starting with the main event, Pac-Ugas defeats Manny Pacquiao in a unanimous decision and retains his WBA super welterweight title. You said that you were in Manny's training camp a couple days out of the week, leading up to the fight. What was your take on when he was training? I mean, we hear that he was looking just as good as he ever did. I mean, what was your take on it being there?
Manny works hard in the gym, and anybody will tell you that with every fighter, not every day goes smooth, but the fighters, the world-class fighters, the champions, the legends, they fought through that. I never seen a drop in his energy level. He was sparring with some good folks, and he had a lot of really, really good days. Tip your hat to Pac-Ugas. I work with Pac-Ugas. I was actually asked to work with Pac-Ugas before and after he got the Pacquiao fight, and I was like, wow, I got to work with Manny. I was there when he fought Abel Ramos and won the title, and I was there when he fought another former of my fighter, Sean Porter, when everybody thought he beat Sean Porter.
Yeah.
Pac-Ugas and his trainer, Ismail Salas, are great people. They're great friends. As much as I wanted Manny to win, I was happy for Yordenis because he's a really good guy. When you look at where his career was gone, he was 14-3, and we all know how boxing is. A 14-3 guy, we don't, quote unquote, nobody thinks much of him. Now look at the fighters. Look at the list of fighters that he has beaten, in Jamal James and Delorme, and he's fought in Porter, and he's beaten Abel Ramos, and he's beaten Manny Pacquiao. I mean, he's really like a success story. One of my mentors, Joe Chavez and Stitch Duran. Stitch Duran was my boxing coach in the Air Force. He ended up working with Pac-Ugas. You know what I mean? And I'm like, Stitch has got me. We worked 2 world title fights. He's got me because I had Joette Gonzalez and Shakur Stevenson. So I got to get some get back. We were there at ringside, and even before, I said, you know what, Jacob? I call him Jacob because I knew him before he was. I said, man, what's better than this? Who would have ever thought this when I met you when I was 19 years old, that we'd be doing this together, And it's just a blessing, and it's always made the best man win. That's what people want to see. They want to see compelling, interesting fights. That's what it was.
Mike, just go into, before we press record, we were kind of just touching about how you just said that, you were begging guys who were like 2 wins and 6 losses, and now you're working with Manny Pacquiao, and like you just said, you're going to be working with Oscar De La Hoya. It sounds like terrible work.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a true story, man. I remember when I was training some guys, because my regular job as a homicide detective, I couldn't be in the gym, like a regular trainer could, because I was busy. And, let's be real, I'm not going to compete with guys like Freddie Roach and Robert Garcia here locally, and Joel Diaz and Manny Robles, Danny Zamora. They all got great stables. And, I never even thought of what a Cutman did until I had a conversation with a Cutman named David Martinez, who worked with Shane Mosley and who worked with Pacquiao. And we were driving home from a fight one day, and I just started picking his brain. And I said, you know what? Maybe this is maybe an avenue that I can start getting into. And I started working at the lower levels of boxing, MMA, I mean, in sawdust joints, with anybody that would take me. And I just started trying to learn everything I could about it. The great thing that I was fortunate was that Carlos Vargas and Stitch Duran and the Rudy Hernandezes and Joe Chavez, these guys, Miguel Diaz, they were all friends. They didn't put up any roadblocks for me. And being a cut man, it's kind of like not a secret society, but it's a very guarded craft. And I respected the craft. And I never tried to make my mark as like somebody that had a cute nickname or, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I never tried to make my mark as somebody that had a cute nickname or a funny hat or a vest. I didn't want to be a cartoon character. I respect boxing too much. I was a former fighter. I trained professional fighters. So I always try to let my work speak for itself. And just slowly, over the course of the last 12, 13 years, I just built my stable of fighters, built my brand and by my work. And, I'm blessed now between my son and I, we got 55 fighters worldwide. And business is good. And to work with a Pacquiao and Pac-Ugas and J-Rock, Julian Williams, and the world champions. I have 21 world champions that I've worked with, including Errol Spence and guys like Sean Porter. So I'm very blessed. And I put as equal amount of heart and work into the preliminary fighters I work with that are fighting 4-6 rounders, because you never know who's going to be that next guy.
Mike, you said you worked under, obviously, the well-known Stitch Duran. So do you have the same pre-fight routine? Do you iron your shirts just like Stitch does?
Stitch is kind of old school because he wears those I'm not gonna. He's gonna get mad at me. Those older guys' shirts. I'm more because I wear a suit and tie to work all the time. So when I'm not at work, I like to wear a nice, well-fitted T-shirt that I'm comfortable in. Stitch is a stylish guy. He always looks the part. And people got to remember one thing. And there's been a lot of great cutmen. Some of the ones that I mentioned, but Jacob Stitch Duran was the one that took being a cut man out of the Stone Ages and transcended both MMA and boxing. He's kind of the one that made it cool to want to be a cut man, to really put like a face. Is he the only guy that has done great work? No. Some of the other guys that I mentioned also. But because of the UFC and his work with the Klitschko's and Andre Ward, and working with legendary trainers, he took it out of the Stone Ages. He made guys more accountable for their technique, and he made more guys accountable for being more sanitary. God bless the old timers from the 60s and the 70s and even the 80s. And they were great cut men. But if you watch some of their work, they weren't the most sanitary guys in the world, and I try to always make sure that my technique and how I am with a fighter, making sure I'm not exposing him, to germs and stuff, it plays an important role in how I operate and how I attack swelling or a cut and manage everything in the corner.
Mate, do you just do boxing, or have you transitioned into like MMA or bare knuckle?
Yeah, I've done a ton of MMA, man. I've done Bellator, Strike Force, Elite XC. It's just the boxing with my fighters is so busy now that I really don't have time for that. I've done it. My son and I, a couple of years ago, actually did an MMA show with Stitch, and it was a kick in the pants for my son, because it was pretty neat working with one of my mentors with my son, and my son's obviously worked a lot of big fights in the last 4 or 5 years as well. So I used to do a lot of MMA, but my boxing schedule, I mean, just take a look at the last 4 months, man. I think I've been home 3 weekends in the last 4 months. I'm looking forward to this weekend. But I actually got a fight Thursday night at the Orange County Fairgrounds with Henry Ramirez, one of his guys. It's like 2-0. And he says, Mike, you don't want to come down there. You were just working with Pacquiao. I said, no, Henry. I put just as much energy into a 4-round guy as I do a world title fight, because I don't ever want to be that guy that thinks I'm too big for something, because it's a very humbling sport. You got to take the good with the bad and the highs with the lows. And I have no problem, working with them on a club show at all. I still like club shows.
I know we've asked you this before, so we know your answer. But for people who are listening to hearing you speak for the first time in depth like this, like you mentioned right now, you're also a detective, a homicide detective for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department here in California. with the schedule with that, and then with as many weekends that you're as busy as you are in boxing, how do you find the time to balance it?
Well, for the first 15 years at Homicide, I was what we consider on the floor, handling murders, officer-involved shootings. The good thing was we were only on call about once a month on the weekend. So if there was a big fight, I would just take it off. But I always tell people, when you weren't seeing me with boxing, I was doing that. The last 2.5 years, I supervise the missing persons unit now at Homicide Bureau. So I'm in the office a little more, but I'm not the one that has to roll out in the middle of the night anymore. I'm more or less delegating and overseeing and consulting now. Even though I'm still full-time, I could have retired in March. So what I've been doing the last 2.5 years is much more user-friendly on my sleep, my lifestyle, and my schedule. So it's definitely a blessing. I put in a lot of hard work. October, I start my 34th year with the Sheriff's Department. I started when I was 9, you know what I mean? So, but, I've been doing this my whole adult life. I still got a little bit of gas left in the tank. I may go another 6 months. I may go another year. I'm not sure. But what I'm doing now really works. I have some great people that I work with. So what I'm doing now really, really works for me in my schedule and allows me the flexibility. But let me tell you something. Before I took over the missing persons unit at Homicide Bureau, I would literally get off of cases and go to fights and vice versa and get done with fights and literally go out to crime scenes.
Man, what a lifestyle you're living, man.
Yeah. But if you do things that you love to do, I always tell people, my mom would always tell me, get some rest. I know you're tired. But when you do stuff that you choose to do, nobody's forcing me to do any of this. Then if you love something, I never feel like I have to go to work. I just press forward. And every time I do get a little tired or maybe a little bit down, I said, look, this is what you signed up for. This is what you want to do. So there's nothing better than that for me anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Going to fight night, how was the corner, because a lot of people are, agree that Ugas did take the win. We felt that he deserved the win as well. But it's not like, Manny Pacquiao got knocked out or anything. He was still in the fight. He lost the fight, but he was still had his moments and
absolutely
he fought hard. What was the mentality in the corner with Freddie Roach and you guys during that whole fight? Did you have a feeling like how he might lose this one?
No. I mean, those are something you reflect on afterwards. But when you're in the heat of the battle, each round, you're not telling a guy, hey, you've already lost this fight. You're getting him ready for the next round. You're encouraging the guy and telling him different things that he needs to do. This wasn't, Freddie and Manny, first rodeo. They've been together for 22 years. Boo Boy's been around for a long time. And I know Justin Fortune has been around since the beginning. So I'm kind of like, the new kid on the block. I'm trying to, learn my way with these guys because I'm honored to be part of that, considering these guys have all been together for 2 decades. So, I just play my position. My job is to make sure that Manny's face is intact from round to round. But there was no sign of desperation or, you're losing this fight. There was a competitive fight. There was a lot of competitive rounds. I thought Manny did really very well in the early stages, of the fight. Ugas is a really, really hard fighter to fight because he's technically sound. He doesn't expose himself a lot. And one thing about Ugas, if you hit him, he always hits you back. Manny's kind of the same way. They were going tit for tat a little bit. It was your Denny's Ugas night, and Manny acknowledged that. And, people were like, oh, retire. It seems like it's a narrative. But it's not like Manny Pacquiao got knocked out. Hell, he lost 115, 113, and 116, 112. I mean, to a guy that's, a legitimate world champion at 42 years of age. So I think he's allowed himself that right to make that decision. It's hard to make a decision. You see these guys, Drew Brees and these athletes and basketball players, are you going to retire? It's a retire because it's good copy. It's a good story. Let the smoke clear, the dust settle. And then your real feelings will come into play. And, obviously he has a lot going on with his country. There's a picture that was posted, I think, on the internet or Twitter where Freddie and Manny were hugging, and I think I got a little bit of run about, Freddie told him, Manny, you're the greatest. And I was fortunate enough to be standing next to them when that happened, to capture such a moment. And then right after they were done, Manny looked at me and he goes, I want to thank you, not just for this fight, but for last fight. I thank you very much. And that meant a lot to me. That meant a lot to me because he didn't have to do it, but it just shows the humility of the man that's always looking out for others. And he always wants to make sure that everybody else is doing good. And, when you think about what he's doing, politically in his country, how can you not root for a guy like that? I mean, Manny is just beloved. Is he undefeated? No. But he took on, it's like Oscar De La Hoya, man. They didn't duck anybody. They didn't miss anybody. A lot of these guys that have these great records, they missed a few people. Guys like Manny Pacquiao and Oscar De La Hoya, they didn't miss anybody. And I respect guys like that because Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns and Marvin Hagler and Roberto Duran and Wilfred Benitez and Pernell Whitakers and the Buddy McGirts and Donald Currys and Milt McCourys, and I could keep going on and on.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't miss anybody. Mike McCallum's, those people didn't miss many people. They fought, and that's why I respect him so much. And Manny Pacquiao was definitely one of the heads of that class.
Mike, you've obviously worked with a lot of big names in boxing, obviously, Manny Pacquiao, Oscar De La Hoya, like you just stated. Is there something different about them? Is there a different aura when you work with those guys?
Yes. Yeah, and I see it in the eyes. There's just a difference. It's like, okay, they're able to slow everything down and remove all the noise around them. The moment is never too big for them because they are as big as they've created that moment. I see it with Oscar De La Hoya in his training camp on a daily basis. There's nobody around. There's 4 of us there, but I see it in the eyes. And I told him that. I can see it in your eyes. Your body may betray you at some point, and that happens to all of us, right? Thoroughbred horses, great athletes. I mean, look at Kobe Bryant, Michael, all of them. But man, they just have that. They just have that little bit of extra when you can see when they're in their zone. Mm-hmm. You ever see Manny Pacquiao shadow box and he gets in his zone, and I mean, he is just lightning fast. I see it with Oscar De La Hoya and the way he moves his hands. I see it with the world champions, that I've worked with the Sean Porters, and you look at the determination. And I worked with Sean when he was cut to ribbons and he was tired, but what does he keep doing? He keeps fighting. These guys are fighters. And too many people with social media now, they're so critical of a guy that takes a loss, or this guy is this and this guy is that. Look, I was a decent amateur fighter. I never turned pro. I was supposed to. But I look at some of these guys and I applaud them because there may not be many people that can tell the difference between them. But I'm one of those people that can, because I've worked with a lot of fighters. And there is just something a little bit different about Hall of Fame guys like a Manny Pacquiao or Oscar De La Hoya, and a Felix Trinidad and those guys. It's just something about him that's just, man, it's just a little bit, I'm not going to say a little bit different. It's something about him that's a lot different.
Was there anything different? You talk about differences, and I'm assuming this is, like as we touched on Manny Pacquiao's work ethic and Freddie Roach and their whole system there. But you were obviously there for the Keith Thurman fight as well, so you got some exposure to that. And now you were there for the Ugas. So 2 training camps, 2 fight nights. Was there anything different that it wasn't like negative or anything, but like, oh, that didn't happen last time?
Both, it's the same. It was the same cast of characters. As far as who was in camp with it, it's very restricted. You'd have different celebrities come in to say hi because Manny's a very popular guy. NBA players, because Manny's a huge basketball fan. A lot of NBA players coming through, and celebrities, but never really distracted Manny from training. It was always toward the end. Freddie runs a great camp. His assistant Marie that runs the gym. You had Justin Fortune there and Blue Boy and his whole staff, Fred Sternberg and David Season, and of course Sean Gibbons and the Manny Pacquiao Promotions. I mean, it's a well-oiled machine. It's not their first rodeo. They're not the Christmas help. You're talking about an 8-division world champion. He knows what he needs to do, and everybody around him knows exactly what their role is. And I think that's the beautiful thing, is you're around professionals. This is professional boxing, and it's nice to be around true pros. I appreciate that.
So trying to remove your bias of being on Manny Pacquiao's team for a second, if you had to put your money on as a fan, do you think he comes back?
I hope he does. I mean, I've never done this. Only 2 times I've ever done this, where I'm standing there waiting for the fighters to come to the ring, and I actually become like a fan, where I actually put my video camera on. Is when I worked with Dominic Wade when he fought Triple G at the Forum. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, wow. And it was this time with Manny when I felt the electricity in the arena, and I could feel the love when he came into the ring. And I saw a video that somebody took for me when he fought Thurman. And it's just, you can't describe that. I'm now on the apron. I'm not fighting, but I'm like, man, I'm part of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm in the inner circle. I'm working the corner in this fight. I mean, it's like, what is better than that? I hope whatever Manny does, whether if he fights again or not, I'll always wish him the best. I think when the dust settles and the smoke clears, he's going to be able to make a good decision. If a good fight comes along, then maybe he takes it. If not, maybe he realizes, you know what? There's other things that he wants to do in his life. He's earned that right. You know, his place in the Hall of Fame, man, is all ready to go. And I have nothing but respect and applaud him for that. I'll leave that to Manny and the people that make those decisions. From a personal standpoint, do I want to work with Manny again? Absolutely. I love working with Freddie. I love working with Manny. I love working with Justin. Do I want to see Manny Pacquiao fight again? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we all do as fans. I think if you're a fan of the sport, realistically, and you say, "Oh, I'd rather see him retire," I don't really think you're a fan. You know, he's like you said, he still did well this past Saturday, even though he lost. He still looked good to me.
It's not like he got blown out in the Super Bowl like the Patriots did years ago by the Bears, 63 to 7. I mean, he was in one judge had it 115, 113. That thing swings another way, and that now you have that judge calling it a draw. So I mean, look, did Ugas win that fight? Yeah, I think everybody would agree that Yordenis Ugas won that fight. There are not too many people arguing that fact. It was his night. He deserves all the accolades and all the praise and everything that goes along with being a world champion. But that's what makes Manny a champion, is just when you count a guy like that and you think he's done, no, he's not done. So I just think they'll make the best. Manny will make the best decision for him and his family. And, it's a beautiful thing to be in that position in life where you kind of you're the master of your own destiny. I think we'd all like to be like that in our lives.
How do you think a potential matchup between Yordenis Ugas and Errol Spence Jr. would match up? What do you think?
It's a really, really good fight because Ugas presents some physical problems for a lot of fighters. Yordenis Ugas is a big welterweight. He's got a big frame. He has long arms. He can hit you from many, many different angles. I've worked with him. I've worked with EJ, with Errol, and with Derek James. He's a fabulous fighter because he comes smoking at you with both barrels, and he's very calm. The one thing that Errol does in his fights is he fights at his pace. He fights, I assume the pace that he fights at is the pace he goes in the gym. He never gets too high, never gets too low. And that's why he's able to wear guys out, because he can take them out to swim, and each round it gets harder for them to swim back. Ugas is a different animal, though. This guy believes in himself. If you look at all these fighters are out there, you name me a fighter that believes in himself, right? In the last 3 years, more than Yordenis Ugas. I mean, I think that is a fantastic fight. You could also put Ugas in with Porter if that doesn't work out with the whole Crawford first bit. Those are really, really good fights. And I mean, I would love to. First of all, I'd love to work them, but I'd also love to watch them.
I think if that matchup does happen, which it's pretty likely that it could happen within the next year or so, I think you're going to have possibly both fighters hit you up for some Cutman services on there. So you're going to have another dilemma.
Yeah, and that's the one thing when you do work with a lot of guys, it always works itself out one way or the other. The last fight I worked with Spence was because of the bubble. His normal Cutman didn't work it, so I did. But I'm in contact with Sean Porter as well. If you go to use me again, they use Stitch this fight. I can't blame them if they want to keep going with Stitch. He might be their lucky charm. There's always other fighters that I would love to work with. And the phone rings, and I'm happy with the stable of guys that I got. It's just kind of like you never get too high, you never get too low. You just kind of go with the flow. And I always try to let my work speak for itself.
And then another matchup that we touched on earlier, Mark Magasayo gets a 10th round KO over Julio Ceja, who, by the way, we've heard that he's doing better. Hopefully everything goes well for him and his team. So he is doing better. So that's good news. What was your take on that fight? And what'd you think? He was obviously very happy with the win. He was very excited, especially jumping into Sean Gibbons' arms at the end.
And what you probably couldn't see on the apron was how excited I was. And I normally don't get that excited, but Mark Magasayo and his wife, Frances, have to be two of my favorite people that I've ever met in boxing. If there is a more humble, gracious kid, hungry kid, and somebody that counts his blessings more than Mark Magasayo, he's in the top of the list of that. And I've grown quite close to Mark in the last year, and I love that kid. And I was working that fight, and he got off to a great start. But Julio Ceja was definitely putting some dents in there, and he was having his moments. And Mark got that second win, and he started listening to what Freddie was telling him. Got back to boxing a little bit and caught his rhythm. And I mean, if that's got to be the knockout of the year. And the first thing, Sean Gibbons came up to the ring, he looked at me, and he's like, "A star is born." And, you know, Sean Gibbons knows his stuff. Sean Gibbons knows his stuff. You look at guys like Sean Gibbons, Samson Lefkowitz, there's a reason they've been in this business a long time, because they know how to do what? They got an eye for talent. They got an eye for talent. And he definitely had an eye for talent. And Mark was just so happy. He was just so happy. But when he got done, he couldn't wait to get back and, you know, to wish Manny luck. I didn't get to, because I was so busy with all the fights, I really didn't get a chance to absorb any of that until, and kind of reflect till afterwards, because I had to go change my shirt, check my ice, and I had to go pee, and then I had to run back and make sure that I was ready to go for the next fight. So it was kind of stressful. I'm sure my blood pressure was up, but you know, it's what I signed up for, and I was ready to go. But look for big things from Mark Magasayo. Also, Carlos Castro, that featherweight division, you know, with the PBC fighters, with Castro, Magasayo, and Tube Scott Niambar, who lost to Colbert, even though he went up a division. Man, those are some interesting fights right there. I work with those guys, so I don't know if they still fight each other all on the same night.
Shepard, what'd you think about Mark Magasayo's win?
Devastating. You know, the knockout was kind of scary because he was down for so long, and then I believe he got back up, Mike, and then he lied back down again, right?
You know, I couldn't see that part because it's fun. We were celebrating, and then at some point we realized Julio's still down. You know, so it was kind of like we had to temper our celebration, our enthusiasm, because you have a wounded warrior there, and Mark realized that as well. You know, because at first when you win, you're just thinking you win. You don't want to think the worst, but you know, unfortunately, I've been in that position. I was with Patrick Day the night that he died, and you know, that he was. When he didn't recover in the ring, I was his Cutman that night, and almost 2 Octobers ago. Mm-hmm. So it's just a harsh reality of a brutal sport. That's nobody's fault. It's just one of the hazards. And I wish Julio nothing but the best, because he was fighting a fantastic fight. And but once you see that, you know, the respect level that you have to, that you should have already. You know, you wish him the best, because it's a very brutal sport. You can come in one way and you can leave another way. And that's the main thing, is that Julio's doing okay. But hats off to him, because he fought a fabulous fight. And Mark had to really, really dig deep. He had to really dig deep. And that's what future world champions do. They dig deep, and they have those moments where maybe somebody else wilted under the pressure and they just become another guy, you know.
You know, him being Mark Magasayo, obviously being with Manny Pacquiao Promotions and under Manny Pacquiao's tutelage, you know, if that's how we want to categorize it. Do you think he's ever asked or talked to Manny and be like, "Hey, man, like, how'd you do the whole 8 divisions thing? You know, like, how do I do something like that?"
I'm sure Manny has. I know Manny does have a huge influence. Probably one of the reasons Mark's over here training in LA at the Wild Card. Excuse me. Is because who else did that? You know, Manny did that. You know, who's the president of Manny Pacquiao Promotions? Sean Gibbons. You know, who makes those things happen? And that's why the Manny Pacquiao Promotions is going to be a force to be reckoned with long after Manny stops fighting. That's why he set this up, and he's got the right people in place. You know, similar to what, you know, Oscar did with Golden Boy. You know, Mayweather's doing it now. I mean, they have the. If you look at the biggest TV fighters in the last 20 years, who are they? Canelo Alvarez, not in no particular order, Manny Pacquiao, Oscar De La Hoya, Floyd Mayweather, you know, probably Anthony Joshua to some degree, a lot of degree actually, you know, and Felix Trinidad, you know, Tyson Fury's got to be up there. So, but as far as guys moving the needle, I mean, that's why, Manny, you put yourself in a position so now that you can help other guys. and bring other guys along. And I think, maybe Mark's that next guy, and hopefully there's more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that there is more to come. So we'll definitely be looking forward towards his future. And then also on the card, on the television portion of the card, Robert Guerrero gets the 10-round unanimous decision win over Victor Ortiz. And Mike, you touched on earlier that obviously you had to work on Ortiz's cut. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, here's the crazy thing, man. I've known Robert and Victor for a few years now. I'm really good friends with Robert and his dad and his whole family. I'm really good friends with them. I mean, like to the point we see each other, we hug each other and we laugh. We go down memory lane. Victor is just the coolest guy in the world, man. Victor's a guy that'll walk and see you and walk over and give you a hug and, hey, how's everything doing? Are you good, Mike? Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I'm getting ready for his fight, and he's over there. He's getting ready to go out to fight. He's like, man, Mike, I'm really glad you're in my corner, man. Thank you for being here. Was that a fight that maybe people would like to see 10 years ago? Absolutely. There were people shitting on it, but you know what? They went out there and they gave 100%. People don't know what it takes, They both made money. They both fought Mayweather. They're both former world champions. I thought it was a fun fight. I mean, are they going to be as spry as they were when they were 24 years old? No. Who in the hell is? I'm not. Victor got cut. He got through it. He's a warrior. The cut, I was able to get under control. So it wasn't a factor. They put it on the line, and I have no problems with fights like that. Was it better that we put one of these guys in with some young hot shot that they're going to get something may happen to them? No, if they want to fight each other, it's entertainment. And people take this stuff, they take it too personal, like they have a pony in the race. They're worried about how much a purse bid is, and what the split is, and what guys for this promoter and this guy. That it's none of their business. They don't got a pony in the race, but everybody wants to be heard. So I don't say much. They don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But these guys fought in Las Vegas on pay-per-view, on a Manny Pacquiao card, and I think people got their money's worth. I have no issue with it.
Before the cut happened, did you know when it happened with that punch, or did you, when he came to the corner, you were like, okay, now it's time for me?
As he's walking back, Pepe Riley says, Mike, he's cut. So I looked, and he was cut. So based on the positioning of it, I told Freddie, I got it. I'll work it from the outside. And then the next round, I told Freddie, you know what? I really want to get this thing under control. I'm going to go in. So the next 2 rounds I got in, and after that, it really wasn't a factor. If you look at his cut, the 9th and the 10th round, it was even barely bleeding because I was able to get it under control, thankfully.
Does your adrenaline go up when you see that it's your moment to come in, especially if it's a big fight on a big network? Like, does your body or does your feelings change?
No, I think the one thing that I pride myself in, I think hopefully why people want to work with me, is I can bring some calm to that. I was a former fighter. I'm a homicide detective. I've been in the military. I've worked lots of bad cuts with Francisco Vargas, Sean Porter, Sergey Lipinets, guys like that things actually slow down for me. And I just go back to my basic technique and the practices that I use, that stuff that has worked for me, and things slow down for me. And hopefully the fighters can see that. And I always tell them, just because you see me working on you doesn't mean anything's wrong. I always want them to have that confidence that when they stand up, I'm going to make their face look good. I can't help what happens during the round. Headbutts, they get punched again and they come back and they're a bloody mess. But when I stand them up, guys like myself and everybody else that I've mentioned, that's what we try to do. We can't control what goes on, like I said, in that next 3 minutes, but we have to control that minute. Most of the time, it's less than a minute that we get to work on these guys.
Shepard, what'd you think about Guerrero versus Ortiz and Guerrero's win ultimately?
Mike summed it up well. I don't mind when you get guys, at the later stages of the career and, they're fighting each other. You wouldn't really want to put in, a Guerrero or a Victor Ortiz in against a Virgil Ortiz. That would be kind of like a death sentence to both of them.
Yeah, so, I don't think either one of them are going to sign up to fight Jaron Ennis, and I wouldn't want to see that. But, there's guys out there that, toward the tail end of their careers, and if they want to fight each other and it puts them in another big fight, God bless him, man. I never try to control anybody's free will. And like I said earlier, there's too many people shitting on a lot of things when they should just be I always try to look at everything from a positive point of view. They didn't get hurt. They fought hard, and Robert won. And now he's in a position where maybe he gets another fight. And who knows what happens with Victor. I know he's doing some things in the movies, in the film industry. You know what I mean? So more power to them. I consider both guys, aside from boxing, I consider both of them friends. And if they called me right now and needed me to help change a flat tire or go pick them up, I would.
Now, talking about the previous conversations we had about sometimes both fighters who might be fighting each other hit you up for your services. You said you're good friends with Robert Guerrero, but you worked Victor Ortiz. Did that also happen this time?
No, actually, I don't work with Robert. That's the crazy thing. I've never worked with Robert. I've never been Robert's Cutman. I'm just good friends with him and his pops and his family. They're from Northern California up in Gilroy. I'm originally from the Bay Area, not super close, but not too far from there. I just known them a long time. They used to actually train at one of my home gyms here in Burbank, Gio's gym, when I was just barely getting back into the sport. So we just became friends, and I've never worked with them, and it's just one of those things where we're always just real cool with each other, and we'll sit down and we'll chat and we'll laugh. Me and his dad Ruben, and we'll bust each other's balls, and we'll just have a really good time. When I saw Robert, his dad had a kid fighting at StubHub or Home Depot or Dignity Health, wherever they have it, and he goes on FaceTime and he's like, "Hey man, his dad puts him on FaceTime with Robert, and then I'm talking to Robert's son. It's those relationships that you build. And just because you don't work with somebody per se doesn't mean that they're not your friends. It's a big boxing world, guys, but it's a very, very small fraternity, and we may all fight with each other, but we're not going to let anybody else do anything to each other.
Right. Absolutely. And Mike, you touched on that you're also working with Oscar De La Hoya on September 11th on his Triller platform debut against Vitor Belfort. When did Oscar's team hit you up to be on their team, and was it him or was it somebody on his team?
I know Oscar in passing, like, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, what's going on?" But I really am good friends with his brother Joel. I work with Joel's fighters. Joel had Francisco Vargas at one time. He has Diego De La Hoya. He's had a couple of other guys, a new kid, Evan Sanchez from Northern California that's with Golden Boy. So I'm kind of Joel's go-to cut man. And not only that, I'm good friends with him and his wife. So when this came about, he says, "Hey, Mike, you're my guy, man. I run all of Oscar's camps. I've been, he works the corner in all of Oscar's fights." Joel has a very, very keen eye for boxing. He's been around it a long time. He's been through the biggest fights in the world with his brother, and he says, "Hey, I talked to my brother and Eric Gomez, and we want to bring you in as the cut man and the guy coming in to wrap Oscar's hand." Joe Chavez was one of my mentors. He was Oscar's cut man. The late Joe Chavez, I think Joe passed away a few years ago. So it was kind of a neat kind of thing that I got to work with one of my mentors' fighters, and Oscar acknowledged that, and I've been wrapping Oscar's hands. And it's been going well. It's been a great experience. It's been a great experience because Oscar's always in a good mood. This is something he wants to do. He's not looking at it like it's something he has to do. And it's really weird because there's not a lot of people around, man. It's just, kind of like me, Oscar's brother, Eric Gomez, and it's just a small group of people, his trainer, Noe, and maybe a sparring partner or two. It's very private. And it's almost like Oscar's doing this for himself. And I think he said it today when he had the media interview, the red carpet thing over there down at LA Live Staples Center, was he's doing this for himself. He misses fighting. He said he misses getting hit. He's got himself in really, really good shape. He's fighting a pretty dangerous guy, and Vitor Belfort. Nobody will argue with that. But I'm pretty confident in the boxing ring, Oscar's going to be able to handle his business.
Now, have you been able to be inside of his training camp at all since linking up with him?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm there with him, 2 to 3 days a week. When my schedule permits, I'm there to wrap his hands, and I want to do as many wraps on his hands before September 11th so that we work out all the kinks. And I think we're right at that point now where he knows what to expect from me, and I know what to expect from him, because I definitely want to be there. It's just that I travel, sometimes on Thursdays for these other fights. But I let them know, hey, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays, I'll be available. I'll be going over there tomorrow. I'll be going over there tomorrow with him at some point during the afternoon and wrapping his hands for his training. He's taking it very serious. I mean, he's getting up every day. He's running, and I think it's going to be a great event. I mean, it's Staples Center, Oscar De La Hoya. I mean, there's a statue out there in front of him, for God's sake. I mean, why not?
I'm off Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Mike, you can always invite me over. That's fine.
Yeah. You know why? Because I look around now, and I got 3 suitcases on the couch. All my family that are all ready to go, and I can't tell if certain clothes are clean or dirty. I got all kinds of bags. I got about 4 bags with my Cutman stuff, and my son's working fights. And it's just like, this week is just, I got mail stacked up like that much. I pay everything by, on the, digitally. I don't even know why I'm having them send me stuff. So this week is catching up on some work. It's just definitely like, I'm looking, you guys can't see it, but I'm looking at a pile of dirty clothes right now. I got tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up and do some laundry. But like I told you guys earlier, man, what's better than doing what you love to do with the ones you love most and at a high level? I mean, this is what everybody's dreaming about. When I was with Oscar, and there's people that are like, Jesus, Mike, you're with Manny Pacquiao one night and you're with Oscar De La Hoya 3 days later. I'm like, yeah, pinch me. I mean, I'm working with Hall of Famers, man. And if somebody would have told me this 13 years ago when I was driving out to some dusty Indian casino for some low-level MMA fight that was probably sanctioned by some Indian casino, begging people, I'm driving 3 hours, begging people that if I could work their corner, so sometimes it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey. And I never discourage anybody from following their dreams. And that's what I did.
So you've worked with obviously Manny Pacquiao and you still continue to work with some of the greatest in the sport today. You said Joel De La Hoya, Oscar's brother, you work with him and his fighters quite a bit. And he's the one who reached out to you and say, hey, we want you to work Oscar's corner. When those words came out of his mouth, what was your reaction? Because, Oscar's been retired for over a decade and, you're the guy that's going to get him in his comeback as a Cutman.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like would have been mad at Joel if he wouldn't have called me because, like, wait a minute, who else are you going to call? Because I've been working with all your fighters for about 7 or 8 years, and Joel's actually a friend. We don't just talk about boxing. He's actually a friend. So I kind of knew what was going on, but Joel waited for the right time to pull the trigger. I think he was making sure that all this was going to come to fruition and there was a date schedule because I know Oscar's been training for a while. And I think once that happened, he reached out to me and, of course, I was like, absolutely, man, I'll do whatever I need to do to facilitate this. And he's like, well, it would really help if you could come over and wrap his hands. First of all, he's got to be comfortable with your hand wrap. And, I was a little not nervous because I'm confident in my hand wrap, but everybody's different. He could have been like, well, my old trainer used to do it like this. And the old Cutman used to do it like that. It's kind of like when you meet a girl and she tells you, oh, my boyfriend used to do this. And you're like, well, I don't want to hear that guy, man. Well, just check me out. But it's good. It's going good. Oscar's an easygoing guy. Obviously when he puts those gloves on, he becomes a different person. You can see the intensity. I mean, he's a 5-6 division world champion. That doesn't happen by accident. He's Olympic gold medalist. But it's going good because, he's not a young kid. I'm 55. He's 48. We actually know a lot of the same people in common. In our circles that we're very familiar with. So it was a very easy fit with Joel and Eric Gomez and the Golden Boy staff because I've worked with them so much over the years, like I do with PBC and Top Rank and stuff. So, building those relationships and those bridges really help. And it's been really good. And I'm excited because I'm actually excited for Oscar because when you see a guy like that and they want to do something and they're determined to do it and they're doing everything in their power to do it, man, I applaud that 100%.
You touched on how every time you get with the new fighter or you're going to when you're going to wrap their hands, obviously some fighters are very specific on how they want. Somebody like Oscar De La Hoya has had thousands of hand wraps over his career. The first time you wrapped his hands, whether it was within the last few weeks or last few months, how did that go? Did he say, oh, you know what, maybe try it like this? What happened?
I asked him specifically how he liked his hand wrap. I knew kind of how Joe Chavez wrapped his hands. Oscar, obviously, like any pro fighter, it was a pro for many years. There are some hand issues that they've dealt with over the years. I made sure I acknowledged that. And it was kind of neat because this trainer, Noe, was hitting the mitts with him after my first time wrapping his hands. And his trainer stopped the mitt work and looked at me and goes, Mike, I can feel the difference in his power with the wrap. Made me feel good. It made me feel kind of accepted as a team. And afterwards, when he took the gloves off, I asked Oscar, how was the wrap? And he looked at me and he goes, Joe Chavez is dancing in heaven right now. He goes, I really like the wraps. So that made me feel really good because Joe was somebody that was very important to me as far as in my journey in being a Cutman. And was a tremendous loss when he passed away. And then to be able to fill in his shoes, he worked Oscar's last fight. Now I'm going to work Oscar's next fight. So I'm very humbled by that. I don't let that escape me.
I don't think that's by accident, man. I think if you believe in destiny, if you're that type of guy, I mean, you're in the right place at the right time, and you worked hard to be where you're at.
I don't believe in coincidences, you know what I mean? And it's this, you know, it's really, guys, like anything, it's about building relationships and your quality of work. And if you're a quality person and you surround yourself with good people, good things are going to, more than likely, good things are going to happen. We're all going to have our bumps in the road. That's just life. But surround yourself with good people, and it gives you a better chance of success. And I think I've done that.
Now, this weekend, there's obviously a Showtime pay-per-view card. Are you working any of those fights on that card, or you have a weekend off?
I had a bunch of people today say, I'll see you this weekend. I'm like, what's going on this weekend? They're like, I think it's a Jake Paul and Woodley fight. And I'm like, no, man, I'm actually hoping nobody calls me. I need a weekend off, man, because I'm going to have Oscar. I'm going to be in Minneapolis for the Fox fight September 15th. I'm going to be with Oscar September 11th, and I'm going to be probably working a couple of the fights on the Fulton Figueroa card in Vegas on September 18th. And I'm sure in the next week, I'm going to start getting some more dates for some other fights. I know you got the Fury Wilder. I'll probably pick up some work on there, and it just keeps going. It just keeps going, and you know, it doesn't stop. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the phone ringing.
And we touched on your son. He's also a Cutman. You've been teaching him the ropes the last couple of years. How's he doing, and what's the future look like for him?
Fantastic. You know, we actually went against each other when Colbert fought Nyambar, and Nyambar is one of both of our fighters, but it's weird because I'm his assistant on the Nyambar, with Nyambar, and he's pretty much taken over all my fighters with John Pullman and Danny Zamora and Henry Ramirez, you know, because they trust him. And I let him start off with a lot of these guys when he was young, the Michael Dutchovers and Ruben Villas and Nyambar. He's actually worked Colbert's fight when Colbert won the interim belt, because I had J-Rock later in the night, so he actually worked that fight. When Lipinets fought Lenny Zaparigny, I had J-Rock in the main event, and he asked me not to work any other fights. And of course, he fights Freddie's guy, Lenny, and Buddy McGirt's in the corner, and Andrew stopped a couple of cuts with Lipinets, and I asked McGirt, I said, hey, Buddy, how did he do? He goes, Mike, it's like having you in the corner. It's not something people are starting to recognize him now the last couple of years, but he's actually been doing it for about 7 or 8 years. Mm-hmm. I just started him off, you know, very basic, but the training wheels are off. I don't really have to tell him. He knows what to do. He's been around Stitch. He's been around Mike Basil. He's been around, you know, guys like Aaron Navarro, the late Todd Harlib. It just doesn't come from me. He's smart enough to realize that there's a lot of ways to do things, and he puts his own personal stamp. He was a good athlete. He's very calm in the corner. His technique is superior, and guys are comfortable. You know, all these trainers that I just mentioned, they're all comfortable working with him. And if I can't make it, first thing out of their mouth is Andrew available? And I said, absolutely, Andrew's available. But it was the second time we'd actually worked opposite each other. So because Colbert, as a last-minute replacement, Nyambar filled in. And Nyambar, I was already working with Colbert, and we obviously worked with Nyambar. But John Pullman, you know, he doesn't let his ego get involved. He understood I already had Colbert, and we went against each other. And we also did it when J-Rock fought Nate Gallimore. Andrew worked Nate Gallimore's corner on Showtime a couple of years ago.
The first time that happened, when I don't know if it was the Gallimore fight, but the first time you guys went against each other, like, oh shit, like that's my son across from me, and we're on opposite sides. What was your mentality? What was your feeling?
It was uncomfortable because J-Rock and his camp and Gallimore, they didn't get along. Me and Andrew were kind of in the middle because it was my home gym over at Pullman's gym, that and Wildcard. And, you know, it was kind of like there was a lot of bad blood between those guys. And me and Andrew, we that week we all got there. We respected the game, and we didn't have much contact with each other. But it's always like I'm looking over, like, is he doing okay? You know what I mean? But you know, it's a weird dynamic. You know, by the time we got to the Nyambar fight, fast forward 3 or 4 years, I know he knows what to do. There's nothing that he hasn't handled. He's worked some hellacious fights with Lipinets with me, with Abel Ramos, and some very tough fights. You know, and he's stopped a lot of bad cuts. He's stopped just as many cuts the last couple of years as anybody else I know. And I'm not just saying that because he's my son, because I'm very honest. I'm very honest about people's work and my own work and his work. So, the future's bright for him because he's 32, and you see a lot of these Cutmen, and they're the guys that are working at the top. They're getting kind of old, man. I'm starting to creep up there myself, but hopefully I got a lot of Miguel Diaz years left in me. When I'm doing this.
It's a good analogy. Yeah, that's a good one. Before we let you go here, Mike, obviously we definitely appreciate your valuable time. For as busy as a man you are, we definitely appreciate your time here on the last round.
I love you guys. I really do.
Yeah, definitely. We appreciate it. I believe the last time we spoke to you, I don't know if it was the last time or the first time you came on, you had touched on that you were currently filming, or you were part of something in regards to your police work. I believe it was it the Black Widow or the murder?
The Black Widow of Lomita. I was actually in the process of filming the episodes for Dateline, and that actually aired a while back. It was a 2-hour special on one of my cases. It was a really good case that we had, and I want to say that might have been around the time when J-Rock beat Heard, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was
around that time, because I know you guys had me on right after. Right, it's funny how I get called off of these big fights, and then everybody wants to talk to you. That and everybody kind of just leaves you alone. But it's a good thing when Julian when he beat Heard, and that was around that same time that they aired that show.
I think Dateline. And I may be wrong, but if people wanted to find that episode, I believe they're available on. I don't know if it's Hulu or one of those streaming services.
Or the NBC app or the Peacock, whatever it is. You can. People call me all the time and say, "Hey, I watched it," it's the episode on Dateline is called the Lomita Black Widow. And even if they Google the Black Widow of Lomita or the Lomita Black Widow, a lot of stuff will come up on it. It's a great case. It was one of my signature cases. It actually happened way back in 2007. And by the time everything came to fruition, it was like 2010, 2011. But it's such a compelling story that it's something that people want to hear about, and it's something that just stays fresh in my mind because it's one of those things where I still remember every last little detail about it.
So, you said you're 55 years old. When you said earlier you were 34 years on the force, and you started when you were 9. I'm doing the math in my head, and it's But
yeah, I just do that as a joke. I actually started when I was 22, and I'm starting my 34th year here in October. So I've been at this my whole adult life, and I've only had 2 jobs in my life, or 3 jobs now. I was in the military, and I've been as a cop, and now a homicide detective, and as a boxing cutman. So I really haven't had that many jobs. I couldn't help you fix your plumbing. I probably couldn't change a flat tire on your car, but I can remember almost every fight that happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And, it's just how my mind works. We kind of gravitate to the things that we love. And that's the one thing that I've learned in this life. I know where I fit in, and I know what I excel in and what I have passion for. And I just try to stay in that lane.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, Mike, like I said, I keep repeating it, but we're definitely grateful that you gave us the time tonight. I think you and probably Kevin Ioli and Dougie Fisher you're right behind them in terms of appearances on here, I think, because they always come on. So I think you're right behind them.
I'm in good company because I love reading. I love reading and following everything that both of those guys do. I respect what they do, and that's the big thing is, when they're objective about things, for better or for worse, then I'll always respect somebody's opinion because when there's no axe to grind, or then I'll listen. Or if you have some kind of expertise, I'll obviously listen. But you guys have a fantastic show. I respect what you guys do. I listen and I watch when I can, and I'm always it's a pleasure for me to always come on. I thank you guys. So you can go back to being Mike there, Shep. You know what I mean?
Right. I know, right?
Yeah.
Mike, if we tell a lot of our guests, if there's anybody you feel it would be a good interview for us, we always have our eyes open. We try to get different people.
Get Mark Magasayo, and who'd be a great guest for you guys. Do you guys know who Pepe Riley is?
We've heard his name. Yeah.
Pepe was on the 92 Olympic team with Oscar. He trained Ray Beltran as a trainer to a world champion. He's one of the assistant trainers with Freddie. Pepe does great work. He's just a fabulous guy. He's one of my best friends. He's somebody that I truly respect. He's just a low-key guy. And I remember when I told Oscar the other day, I said, "Hey, man, Pep said hello." And Oscar looked at me and goes, "This man can fight. Pepe can fight." And they all came. Oscar De La Hoya, he has some great stories about Oscar De La Hoya, him and Shane Mosley, all traveling around to fights with their father all the time. And all three of them were going to make the Olympic team. And the funny story was that him and Oscar made it, and Shane got beat by Vernon Forrest. And Shane couldn't beat Vernon in the amateurs or the pros. But a lot of people don't know this about Pep. Pep went to the 88 Olympic trials at 106 pounds and lost to Michael Carbajal because he knew that Oscar and Shane were ranked higher than him. He couldn't fight at 32 or 39. He went up to 47 to a weight class he didn't even weigh and won the Olympic trials. It's a great story, and he's a good guy.
Oh yeah, that we're definitely open to that. I mean, of course, we'll talk about it off here if you want to maybe let them know that we're interested, and we'll get them on, man.
Yeah, I definitely love to make that happen because he's one of my favorite people in the sport, and he deserves all the. He doesn't ever seek any recognition, but he deserves it.
I'd love for you to help us get Sean Gibbons. We could probably do like a 10-hour show with Sean. All his stories.
Matter of fact, I have to text Sean in the morning. I will text Sean and say I was on this show. Mark Magasayo would be a great guest for you guys. Mm-hmm. I'll let Sean know about that I was on with you guys, and that they'd love to have him and maybe Mark on. You know what I mean? But I'll definitely pass that message along because you guys got a good show. You guys ask great questions. You're well organized, and I've been on a bunch of shows where it's like, how do you guys even have a show? You know what I mean? It's just grab-ass-goal and it's unorganized. I'm like, man, just leave me out of that stuff.
Absolutely. So like I said, we appreciate your time, Mike. Before we let you go ahead and tell people where they can find your stuff and your work and follow you in your boxing Cutman life.
Yeah, basically Twitter and Instagram, it's at Boxer Rods, BOXERRODZ. And I always love to interact with fans, and I try to share as much of what I do, in a very respectable way to promote the sport in the way it deserves. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it, and let's do it again someday.
Awesome. We appreciate your time, man.
Thanks, man. See you later, Shep.
Later, dude. Thank you.
He's a great interview, man. Like we've talked about off air multiple times. I think his work in law enforcement with the job he does, and then, being involved in these, the Black Widow murders he was talking about with being interviewed by NBC Dateline, and being around all these fighters as a Cutman, all these big fighters, all these small fighters, prominent fighters, and what have you. He's very well spoken, and his answers are very thorough. So we definitely appreciate that, right, Mike?
Oh yeah, great. For people that maybe have just joined us since we've been on Boxing Social, they can go back and find like an interview where we go over his career, and maybe just the fact he has to stand up on the stand and paint a picture to people in his law enforcement job. It's the same sort of thing I find that when you ask him a question here, you can close your eyes and his description paints a perfect picture. So yeah, he's a gem for us to interview, compared to, some boxers and some of the people you have on. You can ask him a question and off he goes for, 2-3 minutes, gives you a really good answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you touched on, he's been on the show about 2 or 3 times before this. And I believe the first time he came on, like you said, we touched on his career, in the police force, and then how he got to homicide detective and how he became a Cutman. He touched on it a little bit here and there, in a little bit of tidbits, but we really went into depth the first time he came on. And, obviously those interviews are available on your, favorite podcasting app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and just look through the list, keep scrolling, and eventually you'll find his name, Mike Rodriguez. So big thanks to Mike again for jumping on after such a busy weekend in Las Vegas with Manny Pacquiao, Victor Ortiz, and Mark Magasayo, and others that, we apologize that we didn't mention. But moving on, as we touched on fight previews, this upcoming Sunday, the 29th, a rare Sunday card. It's becoming a lot more common too, these Sunday cards. The 29th of August on Showtime pay-per-view, Jake Paul influencer, the social media star and influencer and YouTube. 3-0 goes up against former MMA and UFC fighter Tyrone Woodley, who's making his boxing debut. Some boxing fans might not appreciate that we're talking about this, but these guys they're boxing. They're boxing. They're not. This isn't an MMA fight. They are boxing. What's your take on this matchup, Mike?
Yeah, I don't mind. If Jake was, pretending that he was a professional fighter and he's going to win a WBC title and stuff like that, it would be different. But the fact that he's going in there and he's fighting, people of like a similar standard, it's, it'd be like. It's like the fights that you see in the law enforcement ones that they do out here, where it's just a couple of guys, do a little bit of training, get in and have a fight. Same as the white collar bouts in the UK. I think the people just kind of get a little bit peed off that he's getting paid so much, but he's bringing all of those eyes to the sport himself. So for me personally, I don't really mind it. It is kind of. I get why he's headlining the event. I would kind of prefer it if we didn't have Chris Conwell and Amanda Serrano underneath him. It would be kind of better if he kind of headlined the event and, the rest of them were all of a similar standard. They were all YouTubers or celebrities fighting each other, stuff like that, because you got, prospects like Tommy Fury and Daniel Dubois, fighting underneath. Same as we had like Billy Joe Saunders fighting under, was it Logan Paul when he fought at the Staples Center?
Right. Yeah. How much, let me ask you this question, Mike, about this whole situation with the, Jake Paul coming in and not being a quote unquote real professional boxer, just kind of jumping in and being main events and being the star of these boxing networks like Showtime and, stuff like that, DAZN. How much do you think, obviously these networks need to make money, and they saw an opportunity here to make money because they get new eyeballs, they get his audience to buy or to show up or what have you. How much do you think the effect of somebody like Mayweather, who left the sport especially for somebody like Showtime, left the sport, and obviously all the money followed him. That was a lot of money that Showtime was making for quite a few years in those 5 years that they had him under contract. That was a lot of money. Do you think if we still had somebody like a Mayweather in, the boxing economy like that, obviously it's difficult with the digital streaming. Do you think we would still see like a Jake Paul and a Logan Paul make their marks like this in the sport of boxing?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a different type of audience. He's bringing all those people from, the internet world, the YouTube world, the social media world are coming over really just to watch him. Because he's such a character, he's kind of witty. He, from what everybody says, the persona that he portrays is completely different to who he is. They all say he's a really nice guy, really humble. So I think you would, because if you look at what was it last year, the highest selling pay-per-view was the Mike Tyson one, which and then obviously Jake Paul and all those guys were on the undercard of those sorts of fights. So
right.
They're doing unbelievable numbers. They're doing higher than what was one of the biggest ones, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. So they're doing something right. So why would you not, if you were Showtime or HBO or Triller or DAZN, why would you not want a slice of that pie?
Yeah. From a business perspective, I can understand it. You got to make money. Somebody like Steven Espinoza, whatever your opinion is on Steven Espinoza, he is the head of Showtime Sports. And at the end of the day, Showtime, I think they're also CBS. It's also the same company. They want revenue. They want profits made. They want money. They want marketing, as many eyeballs as they can on their products. So, we get it in that, Are we fans from like a hardcore boxing stance? Not as much as others, but I think we've been around the sport long enough to really recognize that this is going to happen. Networks at the end of the day have to make money. It's a business. Even the sport of boxing, it's a business. Business. There's a good amount of time where business trumps legacy, especially in this modern age. So we talked about Manny Pacquiao and De La Hoya, how they fought everybody. It's not really as common now as it was 20 years ago or the 80s, especially, or the 90s. There's some fighters obviously out there who are trying to, still stick to that and fight the best. But, it doesn't seem like it's as common, but who knows? But who do you think takes it? Do you think Paul improves to 4-0, or do you think Woodley gives him his first loss?
I think it's going to be a trickier fight than some of the ones he's had before. Just the fact that, he's a ex-UFC fighter and he can strike a little bit in the UFC. Whereas, when he fought Ben Askren and blew Ben Askren out, Ben Askren was literally just ground game only. It's a different type of striking in the MMA world due to the fact that they don't, have that boxing stance and stuff like that. I think Jake probably wins it. I think he's probably done his homework, and whoever his team is has done his homework, and they're carefully selecting these fights for people that can't really, do the stand-up game, can't do haven't really tested out the boxing world. So, I think Jake probably wins it, and obviously it looks like they've put Tommy Fury on the undercard to, fight Jake next. Tommy Fury signed a 2-fight deal with Showtime, so probably blows away Anthony Taylor and then fights Jake Paul in the next one, which should do amazing numbers. Obviously, Tommy Fury is very big in the UK from being Tyson Fury's brother, being in the reality, I think it was Love Island in the UK that he was on. Got a really, really high numbers on social media thanks to that. And then obviously he's a boxer as well. So he's I'll be an interesting one if they do that, because Tommy Fury actually has like a very small amateur background. And obviously he's 6-0, probably 7-0 this coming weekend in the pros. So that would be the first actual boxer that Jake's fought. So very interesting if he does go and fight him.
Obviously, Jake Paul would be the A side in that fight, like he's been so far in all 3 fights that he's had. But do you think, like you said, Tommy Fury has a big following in the UK. Jake Paul is a global star at the moment. The social media reach is global. Do you think that, and it probably not, it'd probably be in over here in the United States, somewhere in New York, Las Vegas, LA or something like that. But do you think it makes sense to put this fight in the UK with the following that Jake Paul and Tommy Fury have combined?
Yeah, I think so. I think you got 70 million people in the UK, 370 million, I think, in the US. So yeah, I think so. I think it makes more sense just in terms of numbers. It's going to be on Showtime, so to make sure they get the US audience, I think it just kind of makes sense for them. And it's brilliant for Frank Warren and Tommy Fury to have Daniel Dubois and Tommy Fury on this card, because it's going to open up a whole new customer base for those guys. If both of them get a sensational knockout, people may tune into one of their next fights. So yeah, it's good work really by both teams.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting. Moving on that card, Amanda Serrano, 41-1, goes up against Yamileth Mercado. Hopefully I said her first name right. If I didn't, I apologize. She's 18-2. What do you think about this matchup?
Interesting fight. We're hoping Amanda Serrano is eventually going to turn around and fight, Katie Taylor, if she ever decides to, take that money, because, she's 40 wins, 1 defeat, 1 draw. There's nowhere else for her to go. She's really just fought everybody in and around those weight divisions, and she's just kind of recycling them. So, take the money. I don't know whether she just doesn't want to fight because she thinks she'll lose, or maybe she's holding out for more money. She's the biggest fight in the division. It'd be like turning down Canelo. Like, you would never turn down Canelo. It's the biggest payday you've got, whether you're going to be like a Caleb Plant and you're just literally selling the belts and you're going to take the L. But at the end of the day, you're a gladiator. You're getting paid to fight. So you need to make as much money as you can. They complain about not getting paid enough in the women's division. So you're turning down the cash cow of the women's division. So why not take it? I think it's a fight Amanda Serrano should really win. Most of the fights on the undercard are, kind of one-sided, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, like you mentioned earlier, Daniel Dubois, Dynamite Dubois, 16-1, goes up against Joe Cusumano, 19-3. What do you think about this matchup?
Like we just said, I think Daniel Dubois really should blow him away. Good for him to come over, probably get the knockout, probably attract some fans by doing that. I think it's just his second fight under Shane McGuigan, so he can probably try to, work on some of the stuff that Shane's been trying to teach him, kind of work on really some of the basics, some of the fundamentals that he was kind of lacking. If you look at Cusumano's record, 19 wins and 3 losses, but he's never really fought anybody of note.
Also on the card, Montana Love. I like the name. Sounds like a bar in Montana or some type of store in Montana. Goes up against Ivan Baranchyk. Baranchyk, obviously, for a lot of our listeners, was in arguably the fight of the year. I believe it was last year against Zepeda. That was an awesome fight. One of those fights that he can go back and watch over and over and, always be entertained. What do you think about this matchup?
Probably the best fight on the card, to be honest with you. Montana Love, really, if you look at his backstory, he's been to jail, I think, for 16 months for, I think it was like some drug charges, came back out, carried on his career. Is a decent level fighter when he puts his mind to it. Baranchyk kind of started off really well and then had a couple of, recent defeats. Like you said, lost to Jose Zepeda and he also lost to Josh Taylor, right?
I believe so.
I think of his only 2 losses. Probably the best fight of the night so far. I'm kind of surprised they got it kind of so low down in the on the card, to be honest with you. See, I would have said Baranchyk, but I don't know how this, it didn't look too good against Zepeda. But interesting fight. I think I'd go Baranchyk, though. I think Baranchyk may just sneak that, maybe too big, too tough, as long as those recent defeats haven't kind of affected him mentally.
Also on the card, Charles Conwell, 15-0, goes up against Juan Carlos Rubio. This is an undefeated battle of undefeated fighters here. Charles Conwell is 15-0. Rubio is 18-0. What do you think about this matchup?
Good fight. Charles Conwell's been kind of moved along real slowly because, we had him on the show back in 2 years ago. When he was kind of when he was first hitting the scene.
Right.
Moving along very slowly, kind of building up a decent standard record. A fight I think he should win, really. I think it's another one of those ones where, Juan Carlos Rubio, if you look at his records, never really fought, anyone of note. But as we've seen on some of those matchroom shows, some of the South Americans come over and, cause an upset when the record doesn't look that great. But they can fight, they're in the ring, the game, heavy-handed. So I still would side with what we can see on paper. I would side with Conwell.
Yeah, I think that's a good safe bet to go with Conwell. And then rounding off the card, like we touched on, the 6-0 Tommy Fury goes up against Anthony Taylor, who is 0-1-0. So Fury definitely is highly expected to get the win here and likely set up a matchup, assuming he wins, with Jake Paul in the future. Moving on to the news and notes section of the podcast episode this week. Ryan Kavanaugh, Triller's head boss, told Mike Coppinger this week that contracts have been sent for the Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos Jr. IBF title fight, which will, I believe it's confirmed or it's been mentioned that it's likely going to land at the Madison Square Gardens Hulu Theater on October 5th. What do you think about this news when you heard it?
Pardon me. Interesting that they've moved from, Florida in a big stadium to now fighting at, the Hulu Theater, which only holds a few thousand. So, I'm guessing that maybe the rumors of, the ticket sales were doing so badly because some of the fights that they wanted to have on there, like Mike Tyson against Evander Holyfield, they couldn't make. So maybe some of those conspiracy theories, those theories that were getting bandied about, that they were moving it because they were just going to take such a huge loss because nobody was buying the tickets, could be true.
Possibly. Yeah. And then Kavanaugh, I think, also revealed that the pay-per-view will run $19.99 on Fight Night by itself, or $2.99 as part of their subscription model, known as Trillerverse. So I'm not sure if it's $2.99 like a month, or are you locked in for like a year? We're not sure how all of that works. So if you're interested in buying it on Fight Night, it's going to be $20, and then you can also look into their subscription model, something like a DAZN. I'm not sure if it's like DAZN where it's like you can pay for 1 month and cancel it, but if you're interested, obviously it's worth looking into. Running off the show here this week, the WBO have set a purse bid date for their ordered welterweight title fight between Terrence Bud Crawford and Showtime Sean Porter, with Thursday, September 2nd. I believe as the date that it will go to a purse bid. What do you think about this news?
I hope so. And I think like we touched on the other week when it kind of got announced, it would be the best name on Terrence Crawford's ledger if he does fight Sean Porter. I think we've all hoping that before he retires, that he does actually, put on a few of the better welterweights, just to really confirm what we all think. When you watch Terrence Crawford fight, he passes the eye test, but at the same time, it's against lower level opposition. He needs to be in there with, A-level opposition like we feel that he is, because a lot of people have him in the pound for pound, top 5, top 3. But for me, you can't, because he's never fought anybody and actually proven it. Like how many people look good against lower level opposition, but then come unstuck against, the upper echelons of the...
Right.
So that's what we need from him. His best victory is probably Postal, which is a good victory, because nobody ever looks, very, very great against Postal because he's a tricky customer. But yeah, we need the Sean Porters, Danny Garcias, Keith Thurmans, Jerome Ennis, Virgil Ortiz, just any of those, just at least give us a couple of them before you retire.
Do you think that whoever wins a purse bid, obviously Top Rank are expected to make a bid. I don't think they're going to make a bid that they think they're going to win. I think they're just going to do it just for the visual standpoint. Like, oh yeah, well, we have to make, we'll make a bid just because he's our guy. But I really don't think they want to pay the guarantees that both of these guys require. I don't know about Al Heyman, and I'm sure they'll make a bid, Showtime, Fox, and stuff like that. About what they feel is going to be right. There's also a rumor or an expectation that Eddie Hearn might jump in and try to get it on the zone. Who knows? But assuming ESPN or Fox, let's just say Fox or Showtime gets it, Al Heyman wins the purse bid. Is this going to be a joint pay-per-view between ESPN and Fox? What do you think?
Yeah. Like you say, the problem is the purses. I think I was reading something today where they're banding about they both won around 5 million. So you're looking at a 10 million purse. Do they both attract enough eyes and enough, bums on seats for a 10 million purse just for the main event? That's the issue I think we're going to have about the fight being made. Are they just both pricing themselves out of it? I think you're looking at probably like a Showtime, a Fox, or maybe even like a Triller comes out of nowhere. Maybe a DAZN, but then that's going to be a DAZN USA because, it'll sell a little bit in the UK, but it's not going to do major numbers because it's going to be on, at 3 o'clock in the morning for a UK customer.
Right.
So I think I would side, more with your PBC and your Triller. Maybe Triller just decide to throw some more money at it to try and get some more subscriptions. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because, the amount that they both seem to be wanting or rumored to want, could just be the downfall for the fight.
And here's your final question as we wrap up the show here. Whatever happens, wherever this fight lands, it's been reported that this is the last contracted fight for Terrence Bud Crawford with Top Rank. Do we see that pairing continue forward, or does Top Rank and Bud Crawford go their separate ways?
I'm thinking that after the way that Bob Arum's treated Crawford and spoken about him and said that he doesn't sell and said that he's losing money, I don't know if Top Rank are even going to offer him a new contract. By the sounds of it, definitely not at the amount of money that Crawford's probably demanding. So I would be surprised if he did stay. I would imagine he'd go over to PBC. And if he doesn't go over to PBC, then I'm afraid we're going to have to say he's ducking. Why would you stay if that's the way that your manager, the leader of your company speaks about you? Then why would you want to stay unless he's just staying for easy money and he's not bothered about legacy and fighting these guys? Where when you see him interviewed, that's the way he seems to act. He's very blasé about it. He's kind of like, well, I'm getting paid, like not bothered what you guys think. So
I wouldn't be surprised if he goes and he signs a 2-fight deal with Eddie Hearn and DAZN, because Virgil Ortiz is the number 1 in WBO as a mandatory. So Eddie Hearn's like, hey, you're going to have to fight him. You just come with us and we can make you the most money on a DAZN platform, and then we'll give you another fight. Or they'll try to sign him maybe a 2-3 fight deal. Maybe it's a 1-fight deal. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just about to touch on it. Do a Canelo. Back yourself. You know, he's a world champion. He has a slice of that pie. Back yourself and just do 1-fight deals with the biggest payers for every single fight that you want to do.
Maybe. Who knows? Who knows if he has the pull for that? I mean, he does, but Canelo's on a different level in terms of that power. But I mean, he is a world champion. He's made a lot of money. He's over the last couple of years, so he should be comfortable financially. But who knows? But big thanks again to our guest of this week here on the last round, Mike Rodriguez, the Cutman and the homicide detective, who worked Manny Pacquiao's corner and other fighters this past weekend in Las Vegas. Big thanks to him again for jumping on and giving us his take on recent news and recent fights and his background in the sport of boxing. As we sign off here, Mike, go ahead and tell our listeners where they can find us and follow us.
We're at the last round 12 on Instagram and Twitter, and be sure to join in next week. We'll be talking about the Jake Paul card, and then looking forward to the rematch of Mauricio Lara against Josh Warrington, and also that card had added to it Conor Benn against Adrian Granados due to that fight falling off during fight camp. Yeah,
couple sneaky good fights that could be good matchups there in the next week and a half or so. So for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is the last round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round